Hello, folks. This is Andrew Gilmore with another episode of Mostly Movies, Maybe Music. And we're focusing on movies again today, and particularly on horror movies, which is something that I haven't had the chance to cover very much in these shows up to now. But my guest today is someone who's an expert on that subject, and his name is Jason Paul Collum. And Jason is a filmmaker. He has written and produced and directed several horror films and written a lot about that subject as well. He's written magazine articles, written a couple of books about horror films, and I know him because of a couple of documentaries he made. One was called Something to Scream About, which was about horror movie actresses, the Scream Queens, as the fans call them. And Something to Scream About was more about horror actresses in general. And then after that, he made this film, if I can get that on camera clearly there, Screaming in High Heels, which specifically is about, you can see the names there, Linnea Quigley and Brink Stevens and Michelle Bauer. And if you don't know those names, those were really the three queens of low-budget horror movies in the 80s and 90s, and well, they're all still working today, but they were big particularly in the 80s and 90s. And so I guess it was, and I'm a big fan of theirs, so I guess it was inevitable that I would see Jason's documentary. And I've met the ladies and had my own experiences with them. I just wanted to display quickly my autographed picture there. So I've had my own experiences meeting them, but of course Jason knows those ladies very well and knows much more about them than I do. So that was how we connected, through Facebook, basically. I just reached out to him because of our mutual interest in those three ladies, and we've actually never met until just a minute ago. We've sort of spoken on Facebook a little bit here and there, but we don't really know each other yet. But I happened to be talking to Jason on Facebook about this podcast, and I got a message from him saying, "Hey, would you consider having me on your show?" And I thought, sure, why would I say no to that if I'm doing a show about movies and here's a filmmaker reaching out for an interview? So why would I turn that down? So he's an interesting guy, and I'm sure we'll have a good conversation today. So, Jason, thank you so much. I'm glad that we connected, and thank you for giving me some of your time today. I really appreciate it. Oh, sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me
Yeah,
now?
now I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
But yeah, I was just saying thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm thrilled. I'm always happy to share my knowledge of the horror genre in general, and then of course when it comes down to these three ladies, I
Yeah,
can't talk enough about how wonderful they are. So
sure. So I told you I just wanted to touch on some general things before we get into the horror stuff, and I wanted to just establish a couple of things that I guess we have in common. One is that I'm a teacher. I don't know if you knew that about me, but I teach film history, and I read that you taught film at one point in your career. So tell me about that.
I did. I was a graduate of the University of Wisconsin Parkside, class of '96, and when I moved back to Wisconsin after several years in California and Chicago, somebody at the university found out that I was back, and they had an opening for the film department. So they had me come in and teach various film courses, intro to film, history, and then that class turned out to be so popular that they opened up a second class for me, which was based in the horror genre.
Wow.
So I did that for many years, and then our governor at some point decided that that kind of class didn't need funding, so they pulled all the funding, and everybody in the
Oh,
department went. So
yeah,
yeah,
the arts are always the first to go, of course.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, what kind of response did you get from your students?
great. I think they hadn't really had a somebody who had been out in LA. Um, I think I was kind of like, oh, look, here's a guy who's actually doing it.
Right.
So the students were always kind of very invested in their conversations with me and their questions, and I have a vast knowledge for useless things.
Right, me too.
If you ask me about taxes, can't do them. But like the things that you really truly need in life, I can't do very well. But
Yeah,
if you ask me about Slumber Party Massacre or Sorority Babes and the Slime Ball Bowl-O-Rama, tons of information.
right.
So
Well, you're talking to a
um,
guy who has a shelf full of 78 RPM records behind him, so I hear you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So I think the kids just kind of it. for them, I think they really enjoyed that I had kind of not only this knowledge of these things, but that I had actually met many people in the business through
Right.
between working in movies and working for a couple of magazines. So I was kind of like that 6 degrees of separation or whatever.
Right.
And then for me, it kind of reignited that I was going to be a teacher initially throughout the course of my entire life. And then all of a sudden, I was like, got into college, swayed into the arts. And here I was kind of coming back to it. And I was like, oh, that's right. I really did want to be a teacher. So I was able to kind of juggle both.
Right. So have some of your students gone on to become filmmakers? Anyone that we would know?
The one person who I know, it's funny that you should bring that up. There's a girl named Kat. I'm going to mispronounce her name, Catherine Cumley, and she was one of my students, and I was hired to work on a show called What Happened to Dorothy Bell. It's in theaters, just started, and doing film festivals, and it's getting a really good reaction. But when I was on that film set, she was on that film set. I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally remember you from being in my class. So she's carried on with it since, oh gosh, that was in 2011. I think I had her in my class. So she's worked as a production assistant and um, I think doing other producer credits behind the scenes. So not much in front of the camera. But that said, I actually hired her to do a little cameo in my most recent film. So
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So I was going to ask you because, as I say, I teach film history, and you mentioned that you've covered that. So I gather that there's a wide range of things that you're interested in, and aside from horror. So would you say there are a lot of things that influence you in terms of film in general?
film in general, I've always been fascinated with the emotions that a film can raise in someone, how it can kind of like touch your heart. It can terrify you. It can make you laugh hysterically. It can make you think. It can make you go numb. It can make you just have like mindless entertainment. Film can be so many different things. Um, and I never went to official film school. Everything that I know about making movies is by watching them. I
Yeah.
just naturally started to watch the editing process, music cues, how actors seem to fit into certain roles, almost as if they'd been written for them. Um, so, angles and lighting and atmosphere and wardrobe, like it all just kind of, um, again, most of the stuff that I watched, especially in my younger years, was horror based, but I've appreciated so many different aspects of the film, the process of the finished product, that I started renting or checking out books from the library as a kid, just looking at film books and how to make movies and what went into it.
Right. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not a filmmaker. I'm more from the history angle, but I'm sure there's a lot you could educate me on there. And
Maybe.
well, you know how it's done, and I don't. So I'm sure as we have other conversations in the future, I'm sure I could learn a lot from you.
Right.
But
Well, and the other thing too is I learned from I'm not a person who can I need to do it in order to learn it, right? I can't just like sit and watch somebody talk. I'm like if you make me do the thing, that's how I learn. And by the luck of the gods or whatever, um, I was brought into meeting and really being taken care of by Brink Stevens,
yes,
who was one of the Scream Queens,
yes,
and she introduced me to both J.R. Bookwalter, who made The Dead Next Door, and David Dakota, who's got like 200 credits to his name, right?
yep.
But he made a lot of cult classics like some of the Puppet Master movies and Sorority Babes and
Nightmare
The
Sisters.
Brotherhood, Nightmare Sisters. Yes. So they both hired me to work on their film sets. So I literally learned how to do so many different things because of those two men kind of allowing me, taking a chance on me when I was like 23 years old, to come work on their film sets. And so I learned just by doing.
Right, you are kind of getting ahead of my questions, but that's okay. Maybe I can jump back to some of the other things later. But well, let's see. Yeah, you're getting. I have to restructure the narrative now. You see what you made me do.
Sorry about that.
Well, these things are not rehearsed, so I have to go with wherever the guest wants to go. But I did, of course, want to talk about your friendship with Brink because obviously she's very important. So tell me about the first time you met her and your impressions of her.
I met Brink when I was 19 years old. It was in 1993, 94. And she was appearing at a Fangoria convention. I'm going to say it was either Chicago or Milwaukee. And I had to wait in a line for an hour and a half to see her because at that point in time, she was extremely popular.
Yeah,
And I had written a spec script for Slumber Party Massacre 4. And even though she had died in the original movie, I figured out a way to bring her back. Um, so Toss said I told her I had the script and guaranteed her there was a way that she could have survived. So she gave me her manager's number and I got her the script and she really liked it. The script never got made, obviously, but we just kind of began a literal pen pal, like physical letters to each other, put them in the mail, and did that for several years. And then when I'm going to say 23 or 24, I told her I was moving out to LA. First, she said, "Don't do it." She said, "But because I know you're going to, you need to come to my house once a month because I know how 20-year-old guys are. They eat crap food and ramen noodles." And so she made me and my then partner a home cooked meal at least once a month. And she had backyard barbecues that she would invite us to. And so that's how I was able to kind of meet other people in the B movie industry
right.
to get my foot in the door. So, I mean, to me, she's an angel. She's one of the most outgoing and welcoming to her fans kind of people that I've ever met. She's very genuine and
Yeah,
always wants to help young filmmakers because she's kind of thanking them for being a fan and buying her merchandise and her movies and keeping her in business, basically. And she also figures if I'm supporting a young filmmaker, they might hire me someday, which is what I've continued to do for the last
right.
30 years. She's been in almost everything that I've done. So
Yes.
she gets a paycheck from me as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know her well. I just know her as a fan, but she's a good person. I know that much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so then I guess, well, I'm going to be posting this in her Facebook group, so we should continue to talk about her. Do you have like a few most memorable moments with her that you could share?
Oh, geez. Let's see. I learned along the way from her a couple of things. One thing was we were making October Moon 2, November Sun, and I put her through a couple of really rough scenes. One of which was she had to climb into a pond um, because there was a casket that had been submerged, and she had like kind of like crawl out to this swampy casket and like open it, and then like arms come up and grab her, and she struggles, and it's a whole nightmare sequence. But it was really gross. Like the pond was nasty. There were for sure turtles in the like snapping turtles in the pond, and probably some other things we don't want to discuss because we'll probably freak her out. Um, and then I also later in the movie tied her to a chair for the climax, and I had fastened the tape around her hands so that it would be easy to break free, but it turns out it was not as easy as I thought it was going to be for her to kind of break the tape. So I kind of learned some techniques to keep actors safe. So she's been um, a model and a mentor to me in so many ways in taking care of actors. And she's never gotten mad with me. She always was just like, maybe next time you want to do this. So,
Yeah,
so she's delightful in that way. Um, she's come to my house many times and slept in my guest room, and she kind of refers to it as her little vacation spot away from home. Um, I'm just trying to think. Um, when she comes to town, we even just kind of go out to dinner, or like whether I go to LA or she comes to my neck of the woods, whether it's Chicago or Milwaukee or here in Racine, to do work. Um, she's always been game for whatever it is I kind of toss at her.
sure.
So,
Yeah, and well, I should ask you about David as well because I guess you might have read my posts on Facebook about this, but Nightmare Sisters just changed my life. And if you want, I could tell you that story. But since we're mostly here to talk about you, but my point is that I wouldn't be here talking to you right now if David hadn't made that film and put the trio
mhm.
together. So tell me about working with David.
David is very matter of fact. He's very, how do I say this? Like when he's making a movie, he has a system down. He knows exactly what he wants and how to get it. So what I learned from Dave is you get a master shot and of everybody. You do a wide shot, you get cover that so everybody's on camera, and then you go actor, 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 and then if you have time, you go back and you can get some fancier shots. But that way, he makes sure that you get enough coverage to make a very cheap movie look very expensive. And the way that he shoots it, 35 millimeter anamorphic. Am I saying that right? Um, Anamorphic. He's such a talent at making things look way more expensive than they really are. He hires the same people a lot on his crews. So whether it's actors or craft service or special effects or wardrobe, you get to become this like little family that he kind of surrounds himself with. So everybody knows their job when they come to one of his sets because 90% of the people on the set all know each other and they all know the routine and they know how quickly we film. He can knock out a movie in 4 or 5 days. I want to say we did The Brotherhood in 4 days. We did Ancient Evil in 4 days. Um, I know he did Sorority Babes, which was before me, obviously, in like, it wasn't more than five. I think it was a 5 day shoot. So he's kind of the master of that. And is also very welcoming to young filmmakers. He wants to kind of share um, hand the opportunities to young people to kind of get their foot in the door. So,
Right.
um, yeah. And then I after I worked with him just as an assistant director in a production, he actually hired me to be more of a permanent in his office when he built Rapid Heart Pictures and opened his doors. I was the first guy that kind of was, I don't know if you call it his assistant, or I kind of ran all of the stuff for him that he needed to be done and did a lot of the publicity for him. And um, I'm very thankful for the opportunities that he's given me.
Yeah. I tried to reach out to him once and he didn't answer, but the next time you see him, thank him for me.
I will.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not like on Facebook and all that. He's not a big responder, so don't
Yeah.
take it personally. I will tell you that
Yeah,
you
I
kind of
won't.
have to hound him a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I was just writing to thank him and tell him I was a fan, so it wasn't anything that important. But
Hmm.
anyway, now that I'm one person away, it works out.
There you go.
So, yeah, we are kind of jumping all over the timeline here, but I should go back because I know you said you started watching horror movies when you were 12. So, what were the first horror movies that impressed you at that age?
It was a triple viewing of Friday the 13th parts one and two. They were on aired on a Friday night, and then the following, I don't know if it was the following night or the following weekend, was Happy Birthday to Me, and I was hooked. I'd always been terrified of like horror movie commercials, so I'd always like go like this whenever any commercial would come on TV. I never watched them unless it was by complete accident. And so, but something about those three movies in particular, I just wanted to see them so bad. And I've said in many an interview that I think my teen angst was kicking in, and that was my outlet. So
Yeah.
I was always kind of siding with the final girl in those movies. Bruised, battered, goes through hell, but comes out on top. And that was kind of
Yeah.
like I think the cycle. Like I didn't understand that at the time, but I think that's kind of what I was associating with. And it just once that weekend of those three movies was done, it was off and running, and I couldn't go to that mom and pop video store more. My mom kind of had to like she'd rent the movies for me, but she had to kind of like reel me in. She's like, okay, 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 like two or three, like that's enough for the weekend. Like you don't need to watch all 15 of these. So,
Right. And I know you worked in a video store for a while, right?
many years.
Yeah. Well, tell me about that. There must be some stories there.
Well, it's funny because a lot of filmmakers you find worked in video stores, guys my
Sure.
age, you know. The main one that I worked at was called Galaxy Video. It was in Racine, Wisconsin. Very mom and pop. It had two locations and then eventually became one. I managed it for many years. And became a buyer at the store, which was like thrill of a lifetime, right? Because I got to choose what movies were going to come to that store. So of course, the horror section went from this to this very quickly. Um, And I don't know, it was like the closest thing to being in movies was being like somebody working at the video store, because people would come up with their opinion or their questions, I should say, and you'd get in discussions with people about something that they wanted to see or something they had just seen and they either loved it or they really hated it. So you were kind of defending a movie or agreeing. Um, it was just always being around those box covers. And I'm
Right.
a physical media guy, right? So to this day, I much prefer to have a DVD or Blu-ray or even a VHS, because I still have all my VHS tapes
Mhm.
and a VCR that works. Um, I like having it in my hands. And I think that was something that comes from that era of going to the video store and having to like pick up the box covers and look at the back and what are the pictures? What's the synopsis? Who was in it? You know, like I would
Yep.
study those box covers. So I did that starting in high school. I think I was a junior when I started, and then I carried that through until about 1996, at the point that I graduated from high school, not high school, college. And
Right.
I left there to go work at another bigger video store, a box store. They were called Planet Video. I don't know how, I don't know if that was a Midwestern franchise or if it was nationwide. Did that for like maybe a year or two, and then I headed to LA. So
Yeah.
why I didn't go to a video store, I'm not sure, but I started working in a bookstore out there. Hated
Oh,
it.
oh gosh. Well, my father used to run a bookstore, so at least you didn't have to work in his. So that's one thing. But my family's in the business, so be careful what you say.
uh,
Uh, anyway, I'm kidding.
it was
But
it was that particular store. It wasn't. I worked at a bookstore here as well, as a kid at Walden Books. They transferred me to a store called Brentano's in the Beverly Center, dead center of Beverly Hills. Saw many a celebrity on a daily basis. Um, First couple of months, I would call home and be like, "I just saw Queen Latifah. I just saw and met Joan Collins. I got to meet John Ritter
wow.
and Nicolas Cage and oh gosh, again, so many, Winona Ryder. That's how I met Felissa Rose.
Oh,
Actually, if I don't know if you've got questions about that, but um, I met her when she was still obscure. Nobody knew or knew that she was around anymore. So I kind of made her aware of it because she came in looking for a book, and I'm like, "Are you Felissa Rose?" And she screamed and ran out of the store because she didn't believe me. She thought it was a setup. So, um,
well,
but the store itself just wasn't a fan of that particular store.
but something positive came out of it, so there you go.
It did.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I had another question about Dave that I forgot to ask. That just you were talking about how quickly he could crank films out, and I'm interested in how that's done because it just, to me, as someone who's not a filmmaker, it just sounds impossible to make a film in 4 days. But obviously, it is. So
Right. Well, they were 12-hour days. You knew you were going in for a 12-hour, at least a 12-hour day. He would try to keep it at 12 hours. Every once in a while, it would go over, but by the time I was working with him, he had such a system down that he knew how much time it was going to take to set up the camera and lights. Um, you kind of get two takes. It's like, so the actors better be on top of their game, right? So, as if he liked the way that a shot went, he would have them run through one more time just for safety, and then on to the next one. So these like bigger productions that have like 30, 40, 50 takes. No, 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 no. It's just like you come in, did it work? Everybody got like sound, good, lighting, everybody's lit well. Okay, good. All right, happy. We're moving on. That really was kind of how he was able to save time, or is, I shouldn't say was like he's dead. He is able to save on time because um, he doesn't waste any time. You are constantly moving on a Dave Dakota set. You've always got something to do, right?
right,
Um, so yeah, I mean, we just kind of, the lighting would come in and they would kind of figure out how they could set up a scene so they wouldn't have to like keep changing lights for different angles, right? So they would learn how to like light a set, where to hide the lights, so that when Dave would turn the camera to a different angle, it wasn't going to take much to reset for the next actor.
right.
So, um, yeah, I was so used to it. And that's how I make movies now. When I shoot a film, it's typically within I do 5 to 6 days. Because I don't want to torture everybody too badly because it's exhausting. Like you would love the energy of it. And everybody on set, um, the sets that I worked on with Dave were good, right? I don't remember really any fights. Um, you're really exhausted at the end of the day, but you knew that you captured a lot of footage at the end of the day. We just don't waste time when whether it's on my set or on Dave's set. Um, you just you go in, you get the shot, you get out, moving on to the next. So it's just like a just keep it moving. Um, yeah, and the crews are kind of small, so you're only dealing with 15, 20 people instead of dealing with like 60 or 70 people, which again I've experienced on other bigger budgeted sets and did not like. I like that small, intimate film crew that he had kind of established. Same with J.R. Bookwalter. It's we just you go in, you get it, you get what you need, and you get out, so that you can move on to the next thing.
Right. So I'm jumping all over the timeline again here, but we've established that you started watching horror movies when you were a teenager, and then how did you become aware of the Scream Queens?
Well, they were in the movies I was watching.
Right, but I mean
I was
specifically.
yeah, it's so it really kind of started more with Fangoria magazine. I was obsessed. It was my Bible. Like I could not wait. Like I would get an issue and be like anxious for the next one to come. It was like having to wait for a whole month for the next issue of Fangoria to come out. It was like torture. So I was more reading about these girls. So like whether it was Linnea Quigley or Brink Stevens or Michelle Bauer. Um, oh gosh, I'm trying to think back to some of the girls, Debbie Dutch or Debbie Rashawn, a lot of the scream queens kind of the 80s and 90s. You just saw their name a lot in the pages, and it would make me seek these movies out. I saw Brink in Slumber Party Massacre, so
Mhm.
that's how I first fell in love with her. Um, but had read about her first. I actually didn't even know who she was. I knew the name, but there was never like a photo to go with it. So it wasn't until I watched Slumber Party Massacre that I figured out who she was. Um, and then Linnea Quigley. Oh gosh, I'm gonna say it was probably Creepazoids or
Mhm.
Sorority Babes that I didn't realize. I think I watched Return of the Living Dead, but didn't realize she was um, trash in that movie. And her character's name is Trash. She's not Trash. The character's name
I
is
was going to
Trash.
say, yeah, just for the people watching who might not have seen that movie.
Yeah, her character's name is Trash. Um, and then with Michelle Bauer, it was I'm pretty sure it was either Sorority Babes or Nightmare Sisters
Mhm.
that I first saw her in, and Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers.
Yep,
If you haven't seen that one, that's top of the B movie pile that
yep.
everybody should have a go at if you haven't yet. So, and just I don't know why I focused in on those three. They were just so fun, like you could tell that when they were making these movies, something just kind of resonated that they were having a good time doing it.
Yeah,
So, and again, there were other actresses that I was always kind of taken with, but that's those three in particular. Those are the movies that kind of caught my eye.
yeah. And, I told you that I'm not necessarily the biggest horror guy, but I've always been a comedy guy, so that was what caught me was their sense of humor. And then I saw Nightmare Sisters and just went, "What is this? Why have I never heard of this before? This is amazing!" And it was during the pandemic, so I had nothing to do but stay home and watch movies. So I started.
It's
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, it's so funny because so many people say to me that they've only recently discovered Nightmare Sisters. It's only kind of become a thing in the last 10 to 15 years. And a lot of it's kind of started when uh, my documentary Screaming in High Heels came out because it showed so many different clips from so many different B movies. And Nightmare Sisters was one of the movies that kind of got a lot of coverage in that
Yep.
documentary. When the movie came out in 87, it came out on VHS. Dave was running a company called Cinema Home Video, and it was like a mail order company. It wasn't that a lot of their stuff necessarily went to video stores. You purchased it through the mail um, and a catalog. And he always thought that it didn't do very well initially because he said it only. I think I want to say he said it only sold about 12,000 units, which in the era was small. That was not a lot. Nowadays, you'd like, oh my god, it sold 12,000 units, you know. Um, but back then, I think that was considered a low number. Um, and then it aired on the USA Network, heavily scissored, with some additional scenes put in. So if you've never seen Nightmare Sisters, there's a lot of bare female flesh
Yes, there is.
that they could not show on USA Up All Night. For kids of the 80s and 90s, you know what USA Up All Night is. Do you know what that is?
Yep.
Okay, with Rhonda Shear.
Yes.
Well, it was a hit. So people kind of first really discovered it through Up All Night, and then it kind of went away. And then it had another little resurgence in the early 2000s because I want to say it was Fred Olin Ray's company, Retro Media, put it out on DVD
Right.
for the first time. So it got a bump there. People were like, oh, what's this fun thing? And then it kind of went away. And then my documentary came out and kind of brought it to the attention of audiences again. And since then, it seems to have kind of stuck. Like that, the fan base for that movie just like grows and grows and grows. So it's like it's finally, like a lot of B movies from the 80s and 90s, now all of a sudden everybody's discovering them through streaming. So
Right. Well, I'm glad you helped because, on the Facebook groups, the fans talk about that movie all the time. So there it is.
mhm.
And yeah, that was just totally life changing for me because once I realized that there were horror movies that were funny, then I was hooked. And I got to meet the girls because of that. And here I am talking to you. So that was completely pivotal for me. And I don't know if you're interested in hearing about me. I mean, we're mostly here to talk
Sure.
about you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah. So that was, yeah, I guess. Well, anyway, I should be asking you other questions and not just ramble about myself. I get self-conscious about doing that. But, oh, I was going to ask you then the first convention that you went to after you had become a fan.
So conventions that I went to as a fan.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first one was the Fangoria. I want to say it was in Milwaukee. It was in '94. And actually, if I look back here, just give me a moment. I'm just going to reach up and grab this photo off the wall. So this is the first time I met
Oh,
Brink. So I'm like 19 or 20 there. Um, and again, I kind of had to wait in line for it was at least an hour and a half to see her. It wrapped around the room. So she was pretty huge. And it was Bruce Campbell from Evil Dead, Angus Scrimm from Phantasm. I want to say Kane Hodder was there. And my funny story with that one was I waited for quite a while to see him as well. He plays Jason in the
yeah.
Friday the 13th movies, in the later ones, 7 through 10. And I had all my questions in my brain, and I was so excited I was going to go up and I was going to ask him all these Friday questions. And I literally got up to the table and I went,
Yeah.
you know, and he was like, "What's your name?" I was like, "Jason." And he's like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Okay." And he signed my stuff. And then I was like, "Thank you." And I walked away. So I never even asked him a question. I totally freaked
Wow.
out. And because I was like in the presence of a god, right?
Right.
And so I was young enough that I needed somebody, I think, to drive me the distances to go to these things. And my uncle Ray took me to several, and I had an uncle Tom who took me to several others. And so it was kind of cool because I was getting to meet all of these celebrities as a fan, and then that kind of made me want to be on the other side of the table at some point. So that's kind of through those conventions. I was like, I want to do this. Like, I
Right.
want to be the guy on the other side of the table someday. And now
Right.
I am.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to ask you what kind of audiences you get at conventions now.
It's I would say it's more people my age ish. I'm very popular with the Halloween people and the Friday the 13th people. The Elm Street people stay a million miles away from me, and I don't know why.
Hmm.
It's the most bizarre thing. And I've had other guys at their tables watch my table between the two different kinds of shows. So for some reason, the like slasher fans of the, again, Halloween and Friday the 13th, they're very interested in my books and my movies and my magazines. And they've got tons of questions for me, and they're very welcoming. And the Elm Street people just stay clear. Like they almost actually like walk around my
Huh.
table. It's so bizarre. And I don't know why that is. I never really been able to put a finger on it because in my brain it was always you're a fan of all three franchises in addition to like Texas Chainsaw or Slumber Party Massacre, whatever your franchises are. I loved all the franchises. I didn't like favor one. So, um, but I guess I did if I had to favor them, the Friday movies and the Halloween movies were kind of more my go-to. So maybe I just for some reason I speak to that group of people more than the Elm Street fans. And I'm not saying that Elm Street people hate me or anything. It's just that they're not interested in my things the way that the other groups are.
Right.
So, um, but I mean, I get all kinds of people. I have had people who have no idea who I am come up, and they're once they're kind of at my table and they see like there's a lot of stuff here. They discover me that way. Um, People who do know me come up with whatever latest releases come out. I did have one guy came up a couple of years ago. It was really touching. He came up with every movie that I'd ever made that was on DVD. He had the whole stack, and he was trembling. And I was like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, I've always wanted to meet you. I'm so excited to finally meet you." And in my brain, I was like, "Really? I don't think I'm that important." But I was so flattered. Um, and then there was another fan who had asked me to go out to dinner after a couple of shows, and I was always kind of not able to make it because I'm kind of in and out towards the end of the evenings. And I did finally go out with him to dinner one year, and we were just sitting talking, having a good time, conversation. And I started talking about being a fan. I want to say it was Adrienne Barbeau or some Linda Blair or somebody that I was a big fan of, like kind of being in awe of. And he said to me, "Well, you know, that's how I feel right now." And I was like, "Huh?" And he's like, "You probably don't see yourself as anybody important, but I see you as somebody important." And it just kind of hit me because I really don't think I'm that special, right? Or that I don't really consider myself famous. There are people who know who I am and like my stuff. That's kind of just how I look at it. But some of the reactions that I've gotten from people are really heartwarming to know, like, wow, like I really have an effect on you. That's so awesome,
Yeah,
for
that's
somebody
great.
if I've never met you before. So,
Yeah, well, I was flattered that you offered to be on my show. I mean, I'm not important, but you wanted to talk to me,
um,
so.
well, I'm sure you have fans through this.
Well, this is only the ninth show that I've done, so I'm working on it.
Mhm.
Yeah, just there were a couple of things I was thinking about. Do you mind if I tell you a couple of stories here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you were asking me if I knew USA Up All Night, and I'm too young to have seen it when it was on, but years ago I discovered Rhonda's YouTube channel where she has all the old shows up there, and that actually was how I first saw Linnea, and then I started watching her movies from that, and I saw the Vice Academy movies first because I wasn't into horror, I was into comedy, so I saw those. And then just briefly I went from there to Nightmare Sisters, and as I say, that just unlocked the whole thing, and I've been a horror fan ever since. So there you go.
Yeah.
So I certainly do know who Rhonda is, and I was supposed to meet her at a convention, but she canceled, so that's a
Oh,
bummer.
yeah.
But hopefully she'll get booked another time. And excuse me, the other thing was just your Kane Hodder story reminded me about when I met Michelle. Can I tell you about that?
Sure.
Yeah, and of course I want to hear about you, how you first met her, but I'll tell you my story first. That I was, it's like you were saying, I was so in awe of well, all three of the girls really, and I've had different experiences with each of them, but especially with Michelle because she doesn't do as many conventions as the other two. I was going in really nervous because I thought, I've got one shot here, and if I screw this up, then that's it. But I got to her table, and it was first thing in the morning, and I introduced myself, and she said, "How are you?" And I couldn't help being honest about it. I said, "I'm nervous," and she looked at me and she said, "Why are you nervous?" As if she's never heard somebody say that before, which I guess proves how good of an actress she is that she could do that. But I said, I don't get to spend a lot of time meeting movie stars, and this is a big deal to me. And I'll never forget what she said. She said, "Well, I think you need a hug." And she stood up and came over and hugged me, and that was our introduction to each other. So I couldn't believe it. And we just had, we got to spend about 10 minutes together and had a really beautiful conversation there. And thanks to Colleen Wingfield, I guess you know Colleen, right? Yeah, thanks to Colleen, I've been able to get back in touch with Michelle recently on Facebook, and we've sort of, I still don't know her that well, but we've sort of become friends now. And, and that was 2 years after I met her at the convention. So And I thought I'd never see her again after that, and then here we are exchanging little Facebook messages. So,
Yeah.
uh,
And, and that's kind of the thing about Michelle and Brink and Felissa Rose. Um, they really genuinely they refer to the fans as their friends, especially the ones that not just what word am I looking for? Have seen many times, right? Have come in contact with and have kept up with. Um, like they're just so genuinely friendly and
yes,
sweethearted, and that you're telling me that Michelle came around and gave you a hug does not surprise me at all.
no,
That is totally that's totally like something that she would do, right? So, um, you had told me that or asked me about the first time that I met her. It was when we were making Screaming in High Heels. So I had talked to her here and there over the years. It usually was in relation to something I was doing with Dave Dakota, but I had not met her. So the day that we were filming her interview for the documentary was the very first time I actually got to meet her, and I fell instantly in love with her. She
yes,
was so sweet and so wonderful,
yeah,
and she's so calm, such a calm person.
yeah,
So
yeah. I really had no idea what to expect going in, and it just really worked out. I think I've met other celebrities, but I think I've never really had an experience like I had with her. So she's really someone special, as you know.
yeah.
And well, I haven't asked you about the first time you met Linnea either. I know you touched on that in the documentary, but if you want to tell that story.
And honestly, I'm trying to think if it's the same time. I want to say the first time I met Linnea in person was for the documentary. I had talked to her over the phone many times, and I had, again, communications between working for Femme Fatale's magazine. When we would do pieces on her, we would need photos or something. So I had spoken with her, but I never met her in person. And I'm pretty sure that the Screaming in High Heels was the first in the same room um, conversation that I had with her.
Oh, I thought you said you met her at a convention.
No, that was Brink.
Oh,
I
maybe
met
I'm
Brink. Yeah,
confusing it then.
yeah. It was
Okay,
Brink was who I met at a convention, and Felissa and um, but no, yeah, no. I waited for Brink in line. Brink was who I had to wait in line for.
right.
Um, so yeah, I want to say it was Screaming in High Heels was our first in the same room conversation. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I was just parenthetically going to mention that I've met Felissa too. I met her at a convention last year, and she
Mhm.
was great.
Yeah.
And let's see, well, we're all over the place, so I'm kind of losing my train of thought a little bit here. Um, oh, we haven't really talked that much about your filmmaking career. I know you started out just making camcorder movies in high school,
Mhm.
and I guess so. Was it Brink that got you into really making films professionally?
Well, I let me think about that. So I was making short movies just with my friends in high school with a camcorder. Um, in like 1990 was the very first one I made. It was called Dead Women Don't Wear Shoes.
Right. I
And it was
saw
a
it.
ripoff of a Twilight Zone episode from the 80s. Um, and I'd made several short camcorder horror movies. And then, let me think about I want to say so my first full-length feature, which was shot on a camcorder, was Mark of the Devil 666. It was made for a company called More Video in Virginia. Made for almost no money. And when I say that, I mean like it was made for like under $500. And I must not have known Brink or known her well enough at that point because I never even thought to include her in any way in the movie. So I want to say that I met her later that year after I'd already filmed it. And then Five Dark Souls, which was the next one, um, I I thought I couldn't afford her, right? Because again, it was like another $500 movie. So I could not have afforded her. But I wanted to include her in some way. So she had given me a sealed comic book. She had a comic book in the 90s called Brink of Destruction, Brink of Eternity. And it came with like a cassette tape. And it was all sealed in a package. And if you watch Five Dark Souls, that is in the movie. And it's autographed by her too. um, so that was kind of how I got her in Five Dark Souls, and then I actually hired her to be in Five Dark Souls Part Three. So, um, in between that, I made a short movie called Julia Wept, which I was trying to be as creative and professional as possible. I'd moved to LA at that point, and I wanted to make a short that was going to start getting me jobs because I really wasn't getting any film jobs. And so she agreed to. I did pay her for it. It was not very much. She agreed to work fairly low scale to be in it for me because she knew it was going to help me out. So she is in Julia Wept as one of the main characters, and it did lead to me getting film jobs. So, but it was still a shot a camcorder movie.
Right.
So,
So when you did Mark of the Devil, how did you feel directing a professional film for the first time?
I was scared that I was going to screw it up.
Yeah.
It was part six to a franchise that not many people really knew about. Um, the original Mark of the Devil came out in 1970. It was like a torture gore movie. And I knew that there was a part two. So I had heard of them, but I had never seen them when More Video offered it to me. The funny part of the story is More Video didn't know how many parts there were. So I had to go pre internet to figure out how many Mark of the Devils existed. So parts three through five were just foreign films retitled with the Mark of the Devil logo on them. They had nothing to do with each other. And I drove to various cities, like going through video stores, trying in their horror sections, trying to like find it. And I think the way I finally figured out that there had been a part five was there was a magazine called The Bee's Nest, and it was put out by Tempe Video, which is J.R. Bookwalter's company. And this is pre me knowing him. And they were selling the franchise. So that was how I finally figured out how many chapters there were. And so I was out to make part six. And of course, I had to call it 666 because why wouldn't you,
Yes.
right? As a horror fan. I was going to do it as a period piece. And then I thought, well, I'm doing this for $500. I can't afford costumes. Um, I don't know. I just did my best and hoped that I wouldn't screw it up too bad. And also just kind of thought to myself, you know what? Everybody has a first. When you make your first movie, whether it's good or bad, everybody starts somewhere when they want to make movies, right? So um, it was not. It was a good experience filming it. It was not a good experience in the post production.
Hmm.
The company really just screwed the whole thing up. They put this really horrendous music score over it. What I submitted to them was a rough cut, and they took the rough cut, laid the bad music over it, and put it out.
Oh boy.
So I was like thinking, oh, they're going to trim down. They're going to trim down this rough cut because it ran like an hour and 40 something, hour and 40, hour and 50 minutes, which is too long for a camcorder movie. You can't hold people's attention on something so cheap, you know? Um, so yeah, the end result was not a good experience. I was very embarrassed for a very long time with it. Um, and then about 6 or 7 years ago, so many people were writing to me saying like, I want to see this movie. I want to see this movie. And I was like, I don't know that you really do. And, but I finally put it out on DVD, in both the original form, and I was working with an editor named Derek Carey, and he really scissored it and made it much more watchable and put a fresh new layer of music over it, worked on the sound, tried to do what he could with the visuals, because again, it's a camcorder. Um, I don't know, and then all of a sudden, like, it went out through this company called MakeFlix, which is JR's company.
Yep.
And it just sold and sold and sold and sold and sold and sold. And I was like, I can't believe that this little $500 movie has this like this following. Again, 20 years later, wasn't a hit. It was not a hit when it first came out. 20 years later, now it's being seen by tons of people. So,
Right. Well,
yeah,
again, even if it wasn't the best experience, it led to something, and you made more films after that, so
yeah,
it all works out.
yeah,
Yeah. I'm always backtracking here, but can I just tell you another story?
sure.
Uh, yeah, you were reminding me about meeting people, having some correspondence with people before you meet them. So I knew I've known Brink on Facebook for a while, and it was kind of funny when I got to the convention because she and Michelle were there together, and I was talking to I talked to Brink on Facebook, and I told her because we had never met before. I told her what I look like, and I said I'm 5'5", I wear glasses, and so on, so she would know who I was. And then when I was talking to Michelle, I was talking to her for a while, and I heard a voice behind me say, "I guess you must be Andrew." And I turned around, and there she was. And of course, there's no mistaking that voice, so I knew right away. And we said hello, and Michelle said, "Oh, I didn't know you were famous, Andrew." So that was my little moment meeting Brink. So I just thought that would amuse you. So there
Mhm.
you go.
And the thing about Brink that I mean, a lot of people probably know it by now, but she is insanely intelligent,
Yes.
and she has multiple degrees, and she speaks like 7 or 8 languages. And I tell you, you give her if I handed her a script, gave her a half hour to go read it, she'd come back with the whole thing memorized. It's crazy, and she speaks it verbatim, like word for word. So even if it even the and even when she speaks it, you're like, oh, that doesn't work because she's speaking it word for written word on the page. It's crazy. She
Well,
has this like photographic memory.
that's interesting. I hadn't heard that before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's see. Where else can we go? Do you mind if I just look at my list of questions here? Because we've covered a lot
Sure.
of. Maybe you should fill in for a minute, because otherwise there'll be an awkward silence.
Um, do you want to maybe talk more about the shot and video stuff, or kind of how I got into more what I consider the more professional end of my
Sure. Yeah, that's where we were heading,
career?
I guess.
Yeah. So I made this short Julia Wept, which is included on the Something to Scream About DVD. And because of that, and maybe I should backtrack a second. So I went and lived in LA for several years, worked for Dave Dakota. And then I was started writing for Femme Fatale's magazine and Fangoria. But Femme Fatale's is where most of my articles were selling. And must have been 2000, 2001. Well, it must have been 2001. 9/11 happened. And it was a scary time in LA when that happened because at that point we didn't know if they were coming for us next. But actually, they were telling us they're coming here next. So we were waiting to get bombed, right? And in the months after that, there was just a lot of paranoia, and I was missing my family. And then Femme Fatales offered me a desk job, or not a desk job, but a desk job, I guess, working in their magazine in their Chicago offices. And I wanted to be closer to my family anyway. So I made the move to Chicago, and then I worked as an editor or as an assistant editor, and I did layouts and I did their advertising, and I continued to write for them. And then I also wound up being the editor in chief of Cinefantastique magazine, which was their sister magazine. And before I ever had an issue come out, the magazines got shut down.
Right.
So,
I heard
so
about
when the
that.
magazines crashed and burned, I was kind of living in misery and wallowing in self pity. And J.R. Bookwalter and I were in a conversation, and I had talked about wanting to make this documentary called Something to Scream About, and he offered to finance it. So that's how I got my first, what I refer to as my first professional film job.
Right.
It went to Showtime, and it aired on Showtime for 3 years. And we had the biggest opening of 2004. The big, not opening. We did a big signing event at the Virgin Megastore on Santa Monica Boulevard in West Hollywood for the premiere. And we had the majority of the girls that were in the documentary were there to sign autographs. It was the biggest showing that they had had for the entire year,
Wow.
um, which is saying something because I think Steven Soderbergh had a signing event like the weekend prior, and they were like, we did like triple what he had show up. So Something to Scream About for me was a really big deal. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, oh my God, I'm in the big time. Like I did it. Like I made a movie. It's on TV. People are coming to see it. Um, I'm signing autographs for this thing. I've got all these girls here. Before the event itself, JR took all of the girls out to dinner and me to this fancy restaurant on Sunset Boulevard. And I just remember sitting at dinner and thinking my life could not be. This is the moment of my life. I'm sitting amongst Julie Strain, who was kind of the queen of all B movies.
Mhm.
Um, she did a bunch of full moon and what didn't she do? Penthouse, and she was Heavy Metal 2000, um, and Judith O'Dea, who was Night of the Living Dead, and several of the girls from Slumber Party Massacre, Deborah DeLiso, Brink, and then we had Slumber Party 3 was Brandy Burkett, Felissa Rose was there, Ariana Albright from a bunch of Tempe's movies. Um, it was just, I just was literally pinching myself like, I have to be dreaming right now. I have to be. There's no way that I'm sitting here in this moment surrounded by these women. And I'm about to go to an autograph signing at the biggest store in LA on Sunset Boulevard after this. Like it was just, it seemed too good to be true. And to this day, it's one of my top 3 days of my life.
I would think so. Yeah. It's hard for me to imagine, but I appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah.
So I guess the obvious question then would be getting into Screaming in High Heels and how that came about.
Well, I was obsessed with the three ladies and wanted to tell their story that nobody was telling. It's such a fascinating story to me.
Yes.
Um, so you had these three actresses who were really models who kind of started doing extra work because it paid more money, and they were typically the shower girls. So the three of them have been in like 100 movies, right? But without ever speaking. They were always just naked somewhere in the movie, typically. Um, and then they had done enough of those that each at their own time started being offered a couple of lines. And then producers were like, oh, okay, well, these girls can actually act and they're willing to take their clothes off, which was really not common, very uncommon in the 80s, because once you took your clothes off on screen as a woman, your career was done. You're a hoe, right? You do porn. That's kind of how it was looked upon back then. So these women would appear in regular, what we'll call them regular, all B movies, right? But in regular scary movies and comedies, and still take off their clothes, and they've got talent. And then they started doing that enough that they started getting name value. So then all of a sudden they were getting hired to be the stars of these movies. And then each of them, because B movies don't really pay a lot, right? They're probably getting $200 a day. They're like movie stars, but in B movie world, you're getting $200 a day. If you're really lucky, like $500 a day. They still had to pay their bills. So like, how can we kind of take this and make more money off of it? So, and Brink was really the one who kind of inspired this, and the two others kind of followed. Um, Trading cards, model kits, comic books, bars of soap with their names on them. Just whatever kind of product they could put their stamp on, they started doing just to make money. It wasn't even to be famous, it was just to make more money. And all of a sudden, this kind of scream queen thing exploded. And Brink, Michelle, and Linnea were always the three at the top of it. And other girls kind of tried to jump on the train and had some level of success to varying degrees. But they were the three that kind of created what we would now consider a scream queen. And they made this little cottage industry that kind of burst for years. And then around 1994, when home video kind of started to collapse because Blockbuster took over everything and put all the mom and pop stores out of business. Um, but for like a good 7 years, I'll say, these women were at the top of the B movie world. And I was like, how is nobody telling this story? This is fascinating. And so the idea germinated with me around the mid 2000s. And it just took until 2011 for me to find enough money, investors, to convince them to do it. And so that's kind of how it all started. And the girls were all on board, thank God. Um, and several of the other men who typically directed them, like David Dakota and Fred Olen Ray, and or who had acted with them, like Richard Gabai and Jay Richardson. So yeah, so that's so I created it, and again we sold it to NBC Universal, and to date that is probably the most successful thing that I've done, both
Right.
financially and critically.
Yeah. So yeah, I was going to ask what kind of feedback you got on it. I'm assuming it was mostly positive.
Mostly positive. I would say 90% not positive. There are a few people who are like, who cares about these girls, or um, that I didn't go deep enough into their background, like into their childhood histories. I'm like, but that's not what this was about. It's like we mentioned their childhood, like, okay, this one grew up here, this one grew up here, this one grew up here. Fans don't care. They want to know, how'd you get into the movies? What are all the movies that you've been in? What's your life like? And so it was meant more as a love letter. I
Yes.
didn't want people to like watch this documentary and like cry at some tragic stories while they're listening to it. I wanted people to learn about the success that these women had created,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, it's interesting because my parents know I'm into the horror movies, but they've never watched them. They don't know anything about it. So I've
Hmm.
been thinking of showing your movie to them, but I'm not sure if they would appreciate it or not.
Well, there's a lot of boobs.
Yeah.
So if they can handle the boobs, I think that they would find it fascinating.
Well, my mother
Just
has
from
boobs,
a,
so
what was that?
well, my mother has boobs, so we do have them in
Right.
the
So,
house.
you know, so as long as they don't have a problem with that, then I think they would enjoy it. It's kind of fun and fast and colorful. I mean, I think we used over 100 film clips from movies that people have never even heard of. And that was in addition to the story of the three girls, fans of it love that there's so many movies to be discovered in that
Yeah.
hour of the documentary.
Yeah, there's so much stuff out there. Yeah. I was going to ask you when you were doing the interviews for the documentary. I mean, obviously you knew their careers very well, but was there anything that they brought up during the interviews that was a real revelation to you?
Um, think about this. Part of it was how little money they made in the beginning. Again, you think movie stars, and they're really just working actresses. And that
Yeah.
was it. That was something kind of surprising, was they all are very blue collar women. They just want to pay their bills. It's their job that they go to. So I was kind of really happily surprised at just how much they are like the rest of us. They're so
Yeah.
like they're not self-inflated at all. They really are just kind of view themselves as you and me. you
Yeah.
know um there was this, I'm not going to repeat it because she asked me not to, but there was a story about with Michelle Bauer. Somebody was really cruel to her on a film set once, and it had to do with aging. And so that kind of surprised me, and the person that she told me who it was. And again, I'm not going to repeat it,
Oh.
but um so there were some stories of some of the hardships that they went through. And I think most of them went into the ones that we heard, the ones that they talked about. A lot of it kind of got touched on in the
Yeah.
doc. But I mean, I had kind of studied them so much over the years and
Yeah.
read so many magazine articles. And once the internet came out, I was like, oh, let's pour all over this information. I really did already know a lot. And just being as close as I am with Brink, learning all the stuff about both herself and the other two ladies, I really kind of did know a lot of the history already.
Yeah. What would you say is your favorite movie with each of them?
Probably Nightmare Sisters. As
Yeah.
a group, you mean? Yeah. Nightmare
Well,
Sisters
I meant
with
individually too.
okay, so well, as a group, Nightmare Sisters, followed very closely by Sorority Babes, which I just watched last night.
Hmm.
um, again for probably the 30th or 40th time. Um, individually, Slumber Party Massacre for Brink. Although I will say, if you have never seen Grandmother's House,
I
you should
haven't.
see it. It's actually scary. Like, because Brink, all three girls typically do kind of campy movies, right?
Right.
And Grandma's House, it's either Grandma's House or Grandmother's House. It depends on who releases it because it's been under both titles. But Brink plays the bad guy, and it's genuinely creepy. Like, it had some good suspense, a couple of good shocks in it. She is genuinely eerie in it. Um, Linnea, I mean, I'm a big Night of the Demons fan.
Sure.
Um, and I love Silent Night, Deadly Night. I always have.
Hmm.
So probably between Night of the Demons and Silent Night, Deadly Night. I know most people go directly to Return of the Living Dead, but for me, it's those two movies. And then Michelle, Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers.
Yeah.
Again, if you've never seen that movie, everybody has to go out and see it because it's so high camp, and the cat and what you can tell that everybody's in on the joke,
Yeah.
you know. Um, and she made a movie called I believe it's Attack of the 60-Foot Centerfold.
Right.
It was in the mid 90s, and she's not in the entire movie. She's kind of more like a bit player in it, but she's so funny in it. And it's full on comedy. It's not horror at all. But um, Michelle is a really good comedian.
Yes.
Like, it's like why people don't hire her to be in comedies more often just kind of baffles me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. I think we've been on for more than an hour, so I don't want to keep you. But just a couple other things I want to touch on, and I haven't mentioned that I'm a writer, and of course that's something that we have in common. So tell me something about your writing process when you're writing a movie.
Well, typically when I write a movie, I already have the actors in mind. I know who I'm writing for. So a lot of the actors, people say to me, "Wow, like they fit that role really well," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's because I wrote it for them," you know. So, I typically start with like the general whatever the idea is that I want to, or the story that I want to tell, and then I figure out, okay, well, who do I want to put in this movie? Who do I want to work with? And I have kind of like my little entourage of Brick Stevens, um, Judith O'Day, and then more of my local actors like Tina Luna Puxdale, Karen DeLu, Darcy Vanderhoff, um, and a few other people. But I have like a core group that I want to make sure I get somewhere in the production. And then I just jot ideas. I'm working on a script or I'm about to begin working on a script right now, and um, just the germination of like this particular project. It's like the kills in it are going to be kind of outrageous. It's more of a comedy than it is horror, so it's more like comedy horror, and like so I'm like, okay, well, what would be a funny way for this person to die, and what would be a funny way for this person to die, and what would be funny here, and I want to throw in a couple of good scares too. So I just have notes like make sure that there are three solid scares, make sure that there are X number of jokes every so often. I learned from um, Fred Olen Ray and Jim Wynorski that if you're making a horror film, you want to kill somebody every 13 minutes because otherwise the audience gets bored, right? So you've got to have something that grabs them every 10 to 13 minutes to keep them entertained. Um, so um, so it's kind of in addition to the story, I'm thinking, okay, what page number is this going to appear on? Because they say, that you're however many pages you have is approximately how long your movie is going to be minute wise. It should be like a minute a page. So I know that on page 13, this person should die somehow in the story, and another 13 pages, or a laugh should occur this many pages in. So it's both creative, but it's also technical. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my other guests was a screenwriter, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then I just kind of sometimes the inspiration just has to come to me. Um, there are days where it's like for whatever reason, the universe has pounded it into my head and I have to get to my laptop and I can't do it fast enough. Um, and then but then I'll go for a stretch of like 2 or 3 weeks without writing anything. Like I always just kind of feel like I need something creative in me to kind of juice up to dedicate. Once I start writing, um, like once I get through the first like paragraph, I can keep going. It's
Yeah.
just kind of like, but I have to have something like go push to get my fingers typing
Yes.
on the keypad. So
Yeah, I can relate. Yeah. Although I actually haven't done any writing since before the pandemic, so I guess I'm lazy, but I'm glad you can keep going.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's just being inspired. Like
Yeah.
I wrote a kid's book. I think I have it here. I'll hold it up. Maybe somebody will buy a copy. So it's
Well,
called
nobody
Heads Up.
watches this show, so I wouldn't count on that.
You never know. um, something happened that inspired me for this story. So I was walking. I was a kid who did not have many friends and was pretty heavily bullied as a little kid.
Hmm.
And so what I didn't realize I had done was, well, let me take a step back. So I took a walk along the lake. This is about 2 years ago. And I realized that in a 45-minute walk, I had not looked up one time. I was looking at my feet in the ground. And I realized, oh my God, I look at the ground when I walk. And I've done that since a kid because looking back, I was always afraid that somebody was going to make fun of me if I made eye contact. So I just hit my head down like this. And as an adult, I'm walking and realizing I missed the lake. I purposely went to the lake to take a walk. I missed the flower gardens. I missed the beach. There's a playground area that I didn't see. There's a little boardwalk area that's just like all this natural, like sand and grass, and you kind of look like you're on the East Coast. And I'd seen none of it, so I went home and jotted down like all these things that I was missing, and kind of turned it into the story for kids. But I realize now that adults love it. So it was written for little kids, like, don't be like me, like make sure you're watching what's around you. But then there's all these adults who are like, I can totally relate. I love your story. I can relate to it. So it was something sparked for me. That's I don't know how your question started, but that's kind of what jogged me to write that story.
Yeah, that's great. I'll have to buy it and take a look at
Please do.
it. Well, you're doing me a favor by being here, so I should return that. So,
It's available on Amazon. Anybody
yeah,
who's reading, just
yeah,
so it's called Heads Up, so you can see the world. Um, yeah, it's
yeah,
short and sweet. Done with watercolors by an artist named Kathy Wilson. She's fantastic. Sketch art. Yeah,
yeah. How long
easy
ago was
read.
that? Is that recent?
That came out a year ago. It was in
Okay.
February of last year.
Yeah.
So, and then prior to that, I had written a book called um, it's called this one's for the horror fans. So it's thick, almost 700 pages, and it's a film guide. It's called They Made How Many? Um, uh, Mostly American horror franchises of the 20th century. So it's a film guide, and it's to if the original movie came out between the year 1900 and New Year's Eve of 1999, the entire franchise will be included in here. So there's like 217 franchises included in this
Well,
bad boy. So um, this is probably after Screaming in High Heels. This is my biggest success.
yeah.
So
Right. Well, I think we should wrap it up. Is there anything else coming up that you want to promote?
well, let's see. I just finished post production on Safe Inside 2. That will be out this summer. Um, and if you there's probably going to be a box set coming out through Makeflix. It's MAKEFLIX.com. They carry the majority of my film work and books, and I'm going to do a 30th anniversary because 2025 is my 30th year since Mark of the Devil 666 came out. Um, and if you buy the box set, you can see kind of, and you start with Mark of the Devil. I apologize in advance. And you just kind of watch them chronologically through the years. You can kind of see that making movies was my film school.
Hmm.
So each movie gets a little bit better than the previous one. And, so October Moon was pretty big for me. I had made one comedy. It's called Shy of Normal. It came out in 2011 and it's never been seen again since. It'll be in that box set. So, um, yeah, everything. So there's going to be 13 movies included in that
Yeah.
set.
Well, then that's unlucky. Then I shouldn't buy it.
Well,
Can't you
maybe
make a?
unlucky for you.
Well,
Lucky
make it.
for me.
Well, you should make a
Well,
14th movie and put it in there. Then it'll be safe.
well, the thing is, I do have 14 movies. So Safe Inside 2 is my 14th movie, but I made a documentary about the Slumber Party Massacre franchise. It's called Sleepless Nights. I don't own the rights to it, so I can't include it.
Ah,
But everything else that I've ever done should be included in that box set.
right.
So,
Okay. Well, we've covered a lot, and there were a couple of things I didn't get to, and I'm sorry if I'm not the most polished interviewer, but this has really been fun, and I've enjoyed meeting you. So thank
yeah,
you.
likewise. And, we can do it again if you'd like, if you've got additional questions or,
Uh,
um, I
yeah,
had a good
hopefully.
time.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
I
had
had
a
a good
good
time.
time too. Thank you,
Yeah,
Jason.
absolutely.
Take care.
All right. Thank you.